I think that's a common thing. I worry about people feeling uncomfortable because I'm not okay. So
Mm-hmm.
if I show up and I look okay, then you'll think I'm okay and you don't have to worry about it. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
it's very complicated. And I think that the intersection of, if we have somebody that's actively in an eating disorder and not liking their size, and then also being really mad and angry at their body and frustrated at its function and pain, that's a really big recipe for disaster, for increased depression, for suicidal ideation. So I like to look at it as, we want to always assess for suicidal thinking. We also want to ask pain level and how you're feeling in your body today. Not about how your body looks, but how are we feeling in our body?
Today, I'm excited to introduce you my special guest, Tamie Gangloff. Tamie is a marriage and family therapist and national business development representative for Healing at Hidden River. She's also an adjunct professor at Westchester University teaching eating disorder psychology. Tamie completed her master's in clinical psychology at Antioch University in Santa Barbara, and she has worked at all levels of care for eating disorders and substance abuse. She's an advocate with the Eating Disorders Coalition, and she's also the founding president of the Southwest Philly IADEP chapter, which is the International Association for Eating Disorder Professionals. She is a former group leader at the National Alliance for Eating Disorders as well. She is the medical trauma advisor for Root to Branch. She's also the author of Chronic Illness and Eating Disorders, Assessment, Clinical Skills, and Lived Experiences. And that is what we are going to be talking about today. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Tamie. Tamie, it is so good to have you here. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, you have a new book that is coming out, Chronic Illness and Eating Disorders, Assessment, Clinical Skills, and Lived Experiences. Your book highlights this really interesting intersection that I've never seen anyone write about before, which is that chronic illness and eating disorders. Why do you think that this intersection has been so under-discussed in the clinical world, and what drew you to make this the focus of your work?
Great question. Yes, 3 weeks from tomorrow, this will be out in the world. Um, you know, It's so close. Well, you read my story, so I say my backstory kind of led me here. The brief answer to that question is that, I had my complex spine fusion 7 years ago, and it wasn't until I broke my wrist and had another surgery a couple years ago, it made things click in a different way. I assumed that no one else understood how I felt except for other people that had the same spine surgery and this awful thing that I had to go through, and my athlete friends didn't understand. And then I had a race accident, and I had emergency surgery because my wrist was in many pieces.
Oh my goodness.
And throughout the recovery, I was like, oh, I'll be good in like a month. I had to fracture clavicle. So anyway, I didn't have limbs to use to make food. I needed a lot of help. And then about a month into it, I was like, oh, this feels the same as it did when I had my spine surgery. And kind of light bulbs went on for me. And the more I thought of how hard it was to feed myself, and I didn't have an appetite because I wasn't moving or because I was nauseous from pain or from surgery, it made me think of the intersection of my history when I had an eating disorder, and how difficult it is to live in a body that doesn't work and also take care of it when you don't want to feed it. And then the other piece is body image as it relates to chronic illness and pain is very different than you looking in the mirror and thinking you're a different size than you are. And that's so misunderstood. And I wanted people to be able to understand that.
It sounds like from reading your book, your history, I mean, it all really started like you've been dealing with this intersection. Like you just highlighted this new stuff, but I mean, this all started. I mean, hasn't this, I don't know how old you are, but it started kind of like when you're like 13 years old. And
I'm 50.
okay, so it's been almost 40
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, it's been my whole life. And who knows when my eating disorder started, probably from before I can remember. But yeah, I mean, I started being followed for scoliosis when I was probably 9 or 10, because I was a year behind my sister.
Hmm.
And so it's really been a part of my life since then. The focus on body, feeling like there's something wrong with my body. And then, of course, the diet culture in my family also went hand in hand nicely with that, as far as creating that perfect storm that led to disordered eating and body image.
At what age approximately would you say you started feeling more solidly in recovery, and or that's when you actually went back to school to then work with people with eating disorders yourself?
Yeah, great question. So I got sober when I was 22. So I'm also sober from alcohol. other substances also, but most of primary alcohol was my primary substance I abused.
Mhm.
And so I went to eating disorder treatment before that. They then sent me to my first 12-step meeting, and I was like, I don't have that problem too. So it was in my first handful of years of sobriety that I went back to treatment for the last time, for the outpatient, intensive outpatient for my eating disorder. So it's been, I guess, about half my life now, so about 25 years in
Wonderful.
recovery. And I started working towards doing different eating disorder awareness events because I didn't know anyone who had recovered. You know, you can go to a 12-step meeting and hear a lot of people that are sober a long, long time, but with eating disorders, I hadn't heard that until I met one woman that had talked about her story. And I said, well, now that I know I can recover, then I'm going to do whatever I can to recover. And now I need to tell everyone else about it. So,
Mhm.
and so I started doing that. And then when we moved to California, I decided to go back to grad school, and I got to work at one of the best treatment centers in the country, you know, through and for my training back then in 2007 to 9. So.
Wonderful. So for someone who is living with both chronic illness or chronic pain, chronic conditions, and also working with their eating disorder, what does recovery necessarily look like? Because it gets complicated. So how would you kind of describe what recovery looks like for someone who's working with both? And maybe there's not such a
Um,
clear, vision of what that recovery looks like.
Yes and no. There is vision and there's not. I'd say, you know, for me, I look back to, you know, my first spine surgery, I was still in my eating disorder. And then when I had my second one, I was recovered for several years. And then of course the last one, it was many years. And so my ability to recover, to do PT, to nourish myself changed over the years. Because if you have, whether or not you're having surgery or if you have chronic pain, we need to nourish ourselves in order to take care of ourselves, right? So if you're in, and I think back to the example I gave you with my wrist fracture, if
Mhm.
I was in an eating disorder, that would have been a great time to be like, cool, I can lose weight now. I can do what I want now. Um, and being recovered for a long time, I knew to reach out to some dietitian friends of mine and say, what can I do to feed myself right now? Because I don't really have working limbs. And so, you know, it's you know, if you nourish yourself and take care of your eating disorder, it doesn't mean it's going to fix your pain, but it means that you're going to be more capable of managing it.
Mm.
I was thinking of this one client, I don't remember their name, but they were in one of the support groups I led. And that day, they said that your chronic illness will be made less difficult by taking care of yourself with nourishing yourself. And I was like, yes,
Mhm.
that's it exactly. There's no guarantee that I'm going to feel better with my medical stuff if I am taking care of myself with food and movement. However, I know that if I do that, I have a much better chance of recovering and doing all the things I need to do to recover. And so it's you know, a constant juggling act, right?
Mhm.
For somebody who's recovered for a long time, obviously that balance is still not easy, but easier to achieve because there's no disordered thoughts. I'm not thinking about the weight loss associated
Mhm.
potentially, not just weight loss. Anything can happen with your weight, right? You know, if somebody's stuck in a body that's not working, they might have urges to binge and purge. Any
Mhm.
urges can come up when you're feeling that frustration with your body. I've answered your question there.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love what you shared that the person in your support group shared because I think that that's really clear when we can nourish ourselves well and take care of ourselves well, being in recovery or acting as if that we are in recovery, then the issues with the chronic illness can hopefully be managed a bit better. I can imagine that if both are spiraling, it's just an absolute miserable nightmare.
I mean, absolutely. You know, I was train wreck may not be the right word, but you know, when I had that, and I mentioned him in the book. I don't know if you remember that, but I had actually gone back to see this surgeon, Dr. Rushton, a few months back when I had a setback a few months ago that we don't need to get into right now, but I can tell you offline. But and so I went back to see him, and it kind of I was like, oh yeah, I talked about this in the book. I should tell him. After my first spine surgery, I was still, you know, in a disordered place in my life. And so I was restricting more afterwards because I couldn't exercise. And so he confronted me, which I'm grateful that he did. I think he did in a really appropriate, kind way. I didn't feel attacked, but he just did a very matter of fact doctor. Like he's like, you might have osteoporosis. How much weight did you lose? I'm like, I didn't lose weight. He's like, okay, let me draw you. He drew me a little diagram of how your body loses calcium. And he sent me to get a DEXA scan. And I was like, oh, shit. This is this is really a real thing here. And he said, you know, you're going to physical therapy, but you're going to physical therapy without energy that your body needs to heal. So your healing is
Yeah.
going to take longer.
Yeah.
And so it started to make sense. And so that really prompted me going back to treatment that last time that I mentioned, around 25 years old. So
You've written powerfully in your book about your own experience with scoliosis and chronic pain and how these affected your relationship with your body, which I think is a really interesting nuance when it comes to the intersection of chronic illness and eating disorder. So, can you talk about how chronic illness can, impact body image and how might clinicians and clients approach body image work with that nuance?
yes, great question. You know, when we look at, again, disordered eating, we're looking at it through the lens of distorted body image, right? And so, you know, that you're looking in the mirror thinking that you're a different size than you are, whether that's bigger, smaller, whatever. And so, through the lens of somebody with chronic illness, we might still be looking at that also, the distortion as far as size goes. But with somebody with chronic illness, and I asked somebody this yesterday, is your body image connected to how you're feeling with your pain and limitations? And so there's several good assessments, the functional appreciation scale, body image disturbance questionnaire, that we can sit down. I don't love some of the wording, like the word defect, but we can sit
Mm,
down with our clients or our peers or our family and ask them those questions because your body image is definitely linked to your function and your pain. You know, it's really hard to be in a body that's not, when you're not feeling good and you have to show up. I always say smile and look pretty for the pictures because that's just what came out one day. And I was like, that's just what it is. So if I have to show up and look pretty for the pictures, right? I have a public facing job, then I have to, you know, work hard at it sometimes, right? As far as feeling okay in my skin. Because if I'm in a lot of pain or if I'm frustrated because I'm having a setback or a flare, if nobody asks me that question, I'm probably not going to offer that information because
mm,
and you can, you know, for your own experience having chronic pain yourself, think about, you know, how you feel some days. I noticed that I had a work event last summer and I changed my shirt like 5 times. I was like, what is this? I don't do this. I haven't done this in 25 years. And I was like, oh, I'm in a ton of pain. And I don't want to have to show up for this thing, but I have to show up for this thing. And so I felt so uncomfortable in my body because it
mhm,
felt awful to be in my body, not because I thought it looked terrible. It looked the same as it did the day before. It just
mhm,
felt awful. And I felt like I
mhm,
had to fake it a little bit, maybe that so that others don't feel uncomfortable. I think that that's a common thing. I worry about people feeling uncomfortable because I'm not okay. So
mm, mhm,
if I show up and I look okay, then you'll think I'm okay and you don't have to worry about it. So anyway,
mm,
it's very complicated. And I think that the intersection of, you know, if we have somebody that's actively in an eating disorder and not liking their size, and then also being really mad and angry at their body and frustrated at its function and pain, that's a really big recipe for disaster, for increased depression, for suicidal ideation. So I like to look at it as, you know, we want to always assess for suicidal thinking. We also want to ask pain level and how you're feeling in your body today. Not about how your body looks, but how are we feeling in our body?
Yeah, that's such an important question and reframe. In your book, you talk about spoon theory, which I know is a little bit related to what you were just talking about, is what do we have the capacity to do, our energy levels and so forth. I actually had never heard of spoon theory, so maybe some people who are listening or watching this haven't heard this either. So I'm wondering if you could talk about what spoon theory is and also how does that help us understand eating disorder behaviors as potentially related to spoon theory?
Great question. And I'll caveat this. It seems like whenever I do a talk and mention this, there's usually one or two people that are stuck on like, how many spoons does everyone have each day? So I'll start by
Mm,
saying,
yeah.
if you need a number, you can pick a number that works for you. Like if it helps to say, I have 10 spoons I'm working with, then stick with 10 spoons. So it's just more of an abstract concept. And so
Mhm.
there's a couple of different ways we can look at it. But spoon theory was created by a blogger. and almost over 20 years ago now, because she was sitting with her partner and literally they had spoons at the table, in saying that, on any given day, we'll just go with that 10 number. I have 10 spoons. And so that might mean I have spoons to say like clean my litter box and feed myself and go to the store, and then maybe 2 or 3 spoons to work and clean the house. And so, if you have a really busy weekend or if you have a really busy work week, you might run out of spoons because you've just depleted all of your energy. And
Mhm.
so it became like a nice language to say, like, I have nothing left to give, right? Instead of saying, it takes a lot of, I think, more vulnerability to say, Christina, I'm exhausted. I have nothing left to give today. Like, I can't anymore. Instead, I can
Yeah.
say, like, I'm out of spoons. I'm out of spoons today. And sometimes I'll go on Instagram and hold up a handful of spoons. And this actually happened to me yesterday. I went away for work last week for a few days. I went to Rochester, New York. I love visiting there. I got to see some friends. I got to do a presentation. I came home. My boyfriend came over. We packed for a couple of days. And then I had physical therapy, all of the things we talked about. And then yesterday afternoon, my body was just like, nope, zero spoons left. And what happens is if you have zero spoons left and you keep pushing through, you're going to just keep getting more and more burnt out. And so if we're connecting that to eating disorder recovery, right, it takes a lot of energy to work on yourself, right, to go to therapy. And depending on what phase you are in your recovery, maybe you're going to IOP or you're going to higher levels of care. Higher levels of care take so much energy, right? So sometimes you just have the energy to show up and do therapy and groups and eat and go lay down. And I think that's common for anyone in treatment. And then you add on top of it the chronic illness piece of it. So, if you only have 10 spoons, you might need 15 if you're in early recovery. So I think it's that, just getting in the practice of you checking in with yourself, and then also, with your client, friends, loved ones, if spoons work for you as a language, then that's great. If it's I think I use the example in the book of my friend Michelle and using money. Speaking of Lancaster, we'd gone to one of the Amish markets to I would get all this prepared food to eat when I couldn't use my my limbs. And
Mhm.
I pulled out my debit card and she pulled out cash. And I was like, nobody uses cash. She's like, I use cash because then I only spend what I have on hand. And I was like, exactly. And that's kind of
Mhm.
really, to me, I was like, that's really the same thing as spoon theory. When I run out of cash, I have nothing left, right?
Right.
You run out of cash, run out of battery life, whatever it is. So that checking in with yourself and really honoring that too,
Right.
because people that don't have chronic pain, chronic illness also struggle with that energy too. So
Yeah, yeah, I think that that is really interesting, especially pertinent to people with chronic illness, and especially because you do need to have a lot of resources to be in recovery, especially early in recovery. So I love that sort of compassionate encouragement, like, hey, let's check in and be mindful about your capacity. You also have a really compassionate and refreshing perspective on movement. The section that you had that is really kind of reframing like, okay, it's not punishment as sometimes it is, in eating disorders, or it's not about performance, but it's something that can be like, you can redefine what it is, like redefine it as joyful, adaptive, and healing. So what helped you shift from a more perfectionistic mindset, or, to one that is like this sort of like compassionate, self-respecting, flexible mindset around movement?
that's a great question. I was like, you already said all the things. We're good. I I feel like it came out of necessity because I was really feeling bad. I didn't grow up as an athlete. I mean, we played softball and things, right? But I wouldn't say I was an athlete until later in life when I started doing triathlon and then obstacle course racing. And now I'm a
Amazing,
retired
by the way.
athlete.
Okay.
Thank you.
Those things are
Now
hard.
I'm a retired athlete. Yeah, I was like, at least I have a good story. This scar on my wrist, like that happened during a Spartan race. So, um, but I think for me, it was, when I started doing triathlon, and my sister knows, I always say this. She also has scoliosis, as you read, and she was doing triathlon first, and I was like, I thought we couldn't do stuff like that because
Mhm.
as kids they really discouraged movement, and those with scoliosis. Now they encourage
Yeah.
it more. And so I was like, I didn't know we can do these things. So I started doing the things. And I really enjoyed it. I don't feel like I'm not competitive. She has a competitive streak, but competitive with myself. I really enjoyed that. Oh my gosh, my body is doing these things that I didn't think it could ever do. And so then getting this thing that I never thought I would have and then losing it was really devastating. And so, as I got worse before I led up to my surgery, I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't ride a bike. I couldn't kick my legs to swim. And so it became of just this constant grieving process. And so then now it's like, okay, I'm expecting it. It doesn't mean I don't feel the grief. I certainly feel it. After my spine surgery, I got a new bike again. I got the bike fit. I worked with the bike coach, and guess what? My body was like, this doesn't feel good. And so I just called him and said, can you just help me sell this bike? And it was a grieving process. So I think shifting expectations to that, my movement is going to change throughout my life. I think my friend Betsy, she's a tennis player. She always has been. She may always be. I'm not in a body that's always going to do the one thing I like to do.
Mm,
So, allowing there to be space for grieving the movement that I can't do anymore. And then also knowing that I have to move because movement is good for healing. If
mhm,
you're in chronic
mhm,
pain, um, not moving causes more pain. And so acknowledging that, like, I might not like the movement that I can do. It might be boring. It might hurt a little bit. I'm not saying we move into pain. I'm saying if I'm doing PT, right? PT is often
right,
painful, but
right.
just adjusting and saying, okay, what is something I can do now? And so, yeah, I think that constant balance of, okay, I'm going to really enjoy. We packed up my office because I'm moving tomorrow. I had a bunch of race medals on the walls, and I said, I'm really grateful I got to do all of those things. I may never do them again, but I got to do that in the body that I had at the time, right?
Mhm,
And my good friend who I just talked about, Michelle, with the money, she texted me a couple of race pictures for one of my favorite races the other day. I was like, first of all, I'm so proud of her, but also, my heart was just like, ugh, it hurts a little bit. And she said, do you not want to see the pictures? I was like, I want to see the pictures. I'm so excited for you. I actually posted some pictures from like race 4 years ago. And also there's a part of me that will maybe be a little bit sad that I won't do those things anymore. So it's a constant balancing act. And I'm working with a new movement. She's not a physical therapist, but I call her a movement therapist, for lack of a better term, because we're coming up with new ways for my body to move because my body is different than other bodies. And
mhm,
she said, what do you want to be able to do? I was like, I want to be able to hike and go to the rock climbing gym. If I don't do anything else, those are the two things I want to do. So that's what we're working towards. But right now, I've been living in the space of my body is limited,
mhm,
and it sucks. Right.
mhm,
And some
mhm,
days I'm okay with it just being neutral movement. I liked neutral because in treatment for a long time, we would say joyful movement. We have to find joyful movement. I was like, sometimes movement is not joyful. And so finding neutral. And then, of course, like I said, sometimes it's painful, like when we're in PT.
mhm,
PT isn't always painful, however, it can
yeah,
be. So reframing that I'm in a phase in my life where my movement is neutral. I
mhm,
might and trying to find some joy in it, whether I'm taking a walk with a friend and I get to have a conversation, or the elliptical is a movement I can do. It's boring, but I really like my
mhm,
music. So
yeah,
finding joy in your movement is something that you can do. So like finding the thing that makes it a little bit more joyful.
yeah. Your attitude to me is just incredibly impressive. Even in just owning like having these limitations that I do, this sucks, like this isn't fun. But I'm also hearing like a constant gratitude of like, okay, I can't do this thing, but I can do this. You're always like it seems like you're searching for the thing that you can do instead of focusing on the things that you can't do. So to me, like that's just a testament to the skills you've developed, your adaptability. To me, it's just so impressive that you are, yeah, always looking forward and just I like the attitude of neutrality. If it's not joyful, at least can it be neutral, but just like getting your movement in however you can. I think that's very impressive. As former professional athlete myself, it's like I know how hard it is to move out of something that you dearly love and that you wish your body could do. I just I recognize it's a really good attitude that you have, Tamie.
Thank you. And not to say that doesn't come and go, right? I definitely have at times when I struggle with it, and I have friends
Mhm.
that I'll reach out to and just like
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to be mad or sad about it and talk about it. And sometimes those times last longer than others, but
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not always positive, but I do.
Yeah.
It's always say like we want to at least you have to reach out to somebody and talk about it. So
Mhm.
if somebody doesn't have that friend or teammate or whoever it is, then like that's where your therapist and your support network comes in. Like we have to have somebody we can say that to, like, I'm so frustrated that I can't do these things.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I try to always say, like, kind of look forward to like what can I do next? Because I that
Yeah.
helps me. When I was in early recovery from my spine surgery, I don't know if you've read any of these books, but some of the books by athletes that went through kind of extreme odds, so like The Long Run and those books were really helpful to me. I'm like, gosh, if you can get run over by a bus and then do a marathon, like sign me up. Just really just witnessing other people's resilience gave me hope that like, okay, I can have that too. And that looks
Hmm.
different for everyone.
Yeah. One of the things going back to this compassion that shines from the book, from my perspective, and you were mentioning grief. You said that it doesn't need to be fixed, which for me, it was a good reminder. Like, I don't need to try to push it away or fix it, but you had expressed that it should be felt, it needs to be witnessed and integrated. Can you talk about how grief shows up in recovery, especially when someone might be mourning a former body or a former identity or a future that they thought that they would have that they now foresee that they're not going to have?
Yeah, I mean, I say, chronic illness is chronic grief. I think I said that in there. And then if you have, part of the grief with eating disorders is letting go of the eating disorder identity. It might be letting go of being a certain size, wearing certain clothes, or even it could be related to a certain sport also. I don't think any movement is inherently disordered. That might not be a popular opinion. It's my opinion. No movement is inherently disordered, but any movement can maybe be made disordered, right? So
Yeah,
I do know some clients that only ran because of maybe the weight loss aspect of it. I also
yeah.
know a lot of people that are recovered many years who just really enjoy running. I enjoyed it. It wasn't part of my eating disorder. So,
Hmm.
so the grief of, there's so many layers of grief with letting go of an eating disorder. It could have been, getting the attention that you need. And that doesn't mean it's attention seeking, but you're used to then having somebody say like, wow, you don't look okay today. What's going on? Instead, now you have to learn to use your voice. So I can let go of that, have to let go of that identity, or let go of the identity of looking a certain way. Or maybe it means growing up and letting go of that former life that you used to have. Some people it's I hold on to, well, if something doesn't go right, it must be because of my eating disorder. So if I let go of it and something doesn't work, I have to take responsibility. So it's different for everyone. So I think identifying what things you're afraid of losing in your recovery is important. And then when you layer on the chronic illness, so I would say chronic illness is chronic grief. Just like with movement, it's also, some people end up going on disability as far as not being able to work, or somebody's type of work might need to change. I'm always very transparent when I talk about like my work because my work involves travel. My travel is limited right now, and so there's grief there. So it's that kind of constant shifting chronic grief piece of it. And so how do I then manage it if that's just a part of my life?
So much of your message, I think one of the things I'm taking away from your book is the reframe and the redefining of strength, and not as, forcing and pushing through, but as like just being compassionate to yourself, listening to your body's limits, honoring the limits. What are some of the most meaningful shifts that you've seen in yourself once this redefinition took root?
That's a good question. Um, one of the harder personal transportation transformations has been with romantic relationships, which I've talked about in my book. I was open about that, which again I didn't really realize till I reread it. And as I told you, and now anyone listening will know, like tomorrow I'm moving in with my partner, and so, but to me. I would have never lived with anyone again because, if you're in a body that's chronically ill and you need help, then there's a price to pay for that. And so I had to do a lot of work around the relationships that I was in, why I was in them, how they impacted me. And that kind of, those are things that's not what love is, right? And even, you read the story of the couple in my book. And I was actually talking with one of them the other day that, that really gave me hope that you can have a true partnership and relationship, even if your body doesn't work the same, right? That's where that interdependence comes in. Maybe I can't do any of the literal heavy lifting, but I have a lot to offer a relationship. And so I had a lot of healing to do because I had a lot of negative messages, and I love CBT. And reframing thoughts, but that was one that was hard for me to reframe because I had a lot of evidence that said, oh, yeah, this is what happens if you're in a relationship and you have your body. And so I had to get support from people that had those good relationships, and then also just heal that part of myself. And as we know, a lot of healing doesn't happen until we're in relationships as well. So having a supportive partner is really helpful there too. So, and it's ongoing work, but I think that was definitely a big part of the transformation for myself. And not that anyone's goal necessarily needs to be being in relationship, but just I'd say more recently, that's one thing that's changed in my life for sure. When I wrote the book, I was single, as it says in there. So weird to be saying this now. It was interesting to reread it then. And I'd say the same even in friendships, friendships with any friends, same thing. Relationally, chronic illness is hard because you're canceling plans or rescheduling, or maybe I'm afraid to make plans. I don't want to disappoint anyone. I planned a big birthday trip for my 50th, and there was the fear of like, oh my gosh, what if I'm not feeling well? I can't cancel because I have friends and family coming with me. So there's a lot of relational stress that comes with that. So that kind of doing a lot of work on that also.
What do you hope people most take away from your story?
I hope that they take away that they are not alone, and that they are seen and heard, and that there are so many people that have this same struggle. We just haven't talked about it yet. And also the hope that you can recover from your eating disorder fully, whether you have chronic illness or not. Just to say it again, you can fully recover. And also I'd say this book is also for those that didn't have maybe an eating disorder too, because I think there's disordered eating that overlaps anyway.
Right.
So for anyone that's reading it, to really take to have some hope that they're not alone in it, that somebody else sees them and gets what they're going through, and also that there's a different way, that they're kind of not sentenced to living this life in this body in a way that they're always feeling bad about themselves. Like they don't have to feel bad about who they are. I always felt defective, like there was something wrong with me. And so
Hmm.
for people to know there isn't something wrong with you, it's unfortunate that we're given that the bodies that we are and have the challenges we have physically, but it doesn't make you defective as a person, right? It's just part of who you are.
Thank you. And then I believe that you shared with me off camera, you're working on developing maybe a resource of clinicians who
Yeah.
are,
Yes.
can you talk about that?
Yeah, so of course, since I've been presenting this at conferences the last couple of years, and so I get a lot of questions. Oh, who does this group, or who can I see that works with chronic illness? And it was kind of like, I don't know. So I actually just posted something on social media, but as I've been having conversations, I started creating my own list. And so, yes, if anyone, and this isn't just for therapists or dietitians, right? But if you're a coach or a physical therapist or a doctor that specifically worked with clients with chronic illness. I would love to meet you. And then, I'd love to have a resource. And then hopefully we can even come together and collaborate on different things. I mentioned earlier, just there's one really good group that I know of, but we need more than one group, right? There's so many
Mhm.
people that need support. So I'd love to be able to build that community. There's a lot of great eating disorder professionals out there. So I've gotten to be, hopefully be a part of growing that community, but we need this one too. So I want to help grow
Mhm.
this. So
I can see the need. I can see you like facilitating or offering or collaborating with others to provide certifications or like CEs related to how this intersects, because your whole book essentially could be a series of these courses that could benefit eating disorder professionals, certainly.
that's my hope. I went to a scoliosis conference last year. I said like 2024 was the year of everything outside my comfort zone, although this year has been too. And so I did a poster presentation at one of the scoliosis conferences last May. It was terrifying because I've been in the eating disorder field for a while. And so I'm pretty comfortable. Not that it still wasn't scary to start to present
Yeah.
at conferences, but doing a poster presentation for anyone that hasn't done one is really hard to do. And then to stand at this poster, one of the first people that came up to me is a gentleman he's a physical therapist, although the rest of the world calls him physiotherapist. We say physical therapist here in the United
Okay.
States, but
Uh-huh.
a physiotherapist and a professor in South Korea. He came up to me and he said, I know you. I was like, no, 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 this is my first time at this conference. He said, no, I follow you. I was like, oh, you're one of my 1,000 people that follow me. But then what I got to do is I presented a webinar for the group of physical therapists that wanted to talk about scoliosis and sports injury and resilience. I'm like, how cool was that to just be able to
Wow.
start that conversation? So
Yeah,
I love that training aspect of it. It's a lot of fun. I'm an adjunct professor. I think you know that too. I love the teaching piece of it. And yeah, I would love to continue to do more for sure. Keep presenting at conferences and then hopefully, yes, I love the workshop idea.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
So if people are, whether they're potential clients or, they have people in their family that's suffering, or whether they're clinicians themselves, is there like an email address or a website that you would recommend that they contact you through, or social media?
Yeah, social media, and or email is fine. So on Instagram, it's the author Tamie Gangloff. Facebook, it's the same, just has some letters after it. My website is just my name, tamiegangloff.com, and I think there's a contact form in there also. And yeah, I have a couple. I have some presentations coming up for those people that are in the Northeast, and then who knows what's next after that. But yeah, I would love to hear from anyone that's either a clinician wanting to work with this population, or if somebody who's just struggling and wants to reach out for support.
Mhm. Wonderful. Thank you. I'll make sure to include those resources in the episode description. And most importantly, your book is about to come out,
The
right?
29th.
Yes, August 29th. And so that will be like if
Still
someone
doesn't
just goes on
feel, it
Amazon, is
doesn't
it
feel, it won't feel real till I do this
right?
in my hands. Sorry about that.
No, that's so
Yeah,
it's super exciting.
it's on Amazon for pre-order. It's been on there forever, which is kind of crazy. And then through the Routledge website, Routledge is the publisher
Wow.
also through that website too.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you so much for being here, Tammy. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. I love this conversation and I would love to continue at any time. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.